Hi there. I've had lots of people ask me why paintings should be varnished because it's something that we always do, and it's a really important step in looking after a painting. So, acrylic paintings and oil paintings both need to be varnished. Oil paintings need to dry for a lot longer, sometimes 3 to 6 months or longer if the paint is really thick. But acrylic paintings you can varnish a lot sooner, obviously, because acrylic paint dries so quickly. So the the reason for varnishing paintings is so that the painting is protected. So when you first paint a painting and leave it to dry, the paint surface is not 100% protected against, like if you wanted to clean the painting, for example, you can go over with a damp rag, but sometimes if the paint hasn't been applied evenly with the right amount of medium, all that sort of stuff, the paint can actually lift off as you're cleaning it. And some clients like to clean vigorously around their homes with lots of nice chemicals. So it's really good to have some sort of barrier over the top of the surface of the painting so that they can really easily be cleaned, dusted. You know, if anyone has a party and throws wine on the painting, then it can be really easily cleaned. So it's really good to have this barrier protection coat over the top of the paint. And the other thing is that I always paint, my painting methods I've kind of learnt from the methods of the old masters. Like we can go into art museums and art galleries and see paintings that are hundreds of years old because the guys that really knew what they were doing back then, it's not all of them because some paintings have kind of disintegrated over time and really need some serious restoration. But a lot of the old masters used really good techniques where they painted a painting in one chemical compound. Like let's say you're looking at oil paint. So you paint with the oil paint and the mediums that you use normally for oil painting, let it dry thoroughly. And when you do the varnish over the top, what they used to do is to use a different compound for the clear varnish that is a different chemistry compound from the paint that's underneath. Now, the reason that they did this was so that the varnish could then stay on the surface of the painting just as a clear protective layer, and then over the years and years of the painting being hung in the atmosphere, there's like dust and grime and smoke and acid or whatever's in the atmosphere gets soaked into that clear surface of the varnish, but it doesn't actually get through to the paint. So over the years, the varnish becomes brown and yellowy, and it's absorbed all of the bad things that are floating around in the air and formed a barrier to protect the paint that's underneath it. So then what the restorers do is because the two layers of the paint underneath and the clear coat varnish over the top are two different compounds, they use a solvent that will dissolve the top clear coat but not affect the paint underneath at all. So what they would do then is they would carefully remove with the solvent the entire layer of varnish. Let's say it's after a couple of 100 years or something. Remove all that brown discolored varnish, and then they could actually just paint a new fresh layer of varnish over the top. So I'm hoping that my paintings might be around for a couple of 100 years. You've got to always keep hoping and dreaming, don't you? So I'm always keeping that in mind for my clients to make sure that their painting is going to have longevity. So it's kind of an archival method that I'm using that means that the painting can be around for a long time. So with acrylic paintings, I'll just switch the camera over and have a look at this one that I did yesterday. With acrylic paintings, I use a different chemical compound as well. So on the acrylic paint, that's kind of like plastic. When you're painting in acrylic paint, it's kind of like painting in plastic. So this painting was done quite thick, and it needed to be dried over a long period of time because I really gobbed on the thick paint to get this painting done in such a short amount of time. And so once it's all 100% dry, and there's a trick that I'll tell you about that as well. Then the varnish can go over the top. Now the varnish that I use on top of acrylic paints, so acrylic paints are water-based and they're kind of like plastic when they dry, but I'm using a solvent-based varnish over the top. It's a very smelly, stinky solvent-based varnish, so that means that you can't wash your brushes up in water. It's got to be washed up in terps. So having a solvent-based varnish over the top means that the art restorers, whenever it ever happens, can remove the varnish, and I've had to do it once in a while for some paintings, remove a varnish and then put a new fresh coat over the top. I can really easily remove that layer of clear varnish by using the solvents to dissolve it, and it doesn't affect the plastic layer of paint at all underneath. So the tip I was going to tell you about with acrylic paintings to make sure that they're dry is acrylic paints, usually if it's a fairly thin layer of paint, takes about 30 days to fully cure. So what that means is when you first paint with acrylic paint, the paint is quite weak. So, you know, when you first paint, let's say you drop a drop of paint onto a melamine tabletop, it's pretty easy to get it off. Even after it's dried in the first hour or so, it's pretty easy to kind of just scratch it off with your fingernail because the paint's still kind of soft and rubbery. But if you left that for, say, a month, it would go really rock hard and it would be difficult to remove. So the same thing happens on the canvas. So once you first apply the paint, you can tell that it hasn't quite fully cured. I've got a way of telling when I want to test it to see if it's fully cured, is I get my thumbnail and I go to the thickest part of the paint and I just press my thumbnail straight into the paint. If it leaves an indentation in there, I know that the paint still hasn't 100% cured to rock hard. If I can't get my thumb to actually make a mark in there, my thumbnail, then I know that it's rock hard and it has been cured. So it's after it's fully cured is when you want to do the varnish, because after it's fully cured is when all of the fuming off, the evaporation, which is what the drying process is, all the evaporation is finished, and then you can seal it over so that no air can get into it at all. So if you seal it too soon, when it's not quite dry yet, you may have some bubbling happening. So it's always extremely important to dry the layer of the paint first before finally doing the final sealing clear coat. So the other reason that I love varnishing is because it takes the grey sheen off the painting and you can see the beautiful rich colours in the paint underneath. So it really just transforms the artwork when you can look through and see the richness of the colours underneath. So that's all about why you should varnish an oil and acrylic painting. If you want any more tips, go over to the dojo at Zen and the Art of Art. So it's dojo.zenartart.com for lots more free tips. Thanks for watching.